Welcome to Gotta Run. This is Will Sanchez. Thank you for tuning in. This is a very special Gotta Run. We're honoring the memories of two pioneers, Art Hall and Tom Fleming. My special guest tonight is Jeff Benjamin. Jeff is a longtime member of SIAC. In fact, he was formerly president of the Staten Island Athletic Club. He is a longtime writer, over 25 years for various publications covering track and field and the running community in general. He is sometimes known as the mayor of Staten Island running. I'm thrilled to have Jeff as a guest.
Thank you. I'm very honored to be here. This is a great show.
Jeff, we're only going to scratch the surface today. You've done so much. Your expertise, your knowledge, your generosity is encyclopedic. But before we go into honoring your two mentors, Art and Tom, let's introduce you to our audience. Tell us where you were born and something about your growing up years.
Sure. I lived in Brooklyn and moved to Staten Island in 1972 and never left. I competed. Art Hall was my first running coach. And then I later on went on to run at Susan Wagner High School under Coach Steve Zaccarello. My number one guy on the team is a very familiar Manhattanite now, Jimmy Lynch. And Jimmy was our number one guy. I was the number 5 guy in the cross-country team, and we won the city championship in 1982. And from there, I ran for the College of Staten Island, and I've always been involved in the sport at some level.
I know you have. So you were born in Brooklyn?
Yeah, pretty much. Pretty much.
But you were raised in Staten Island,
right.
So you consider yourself a Staten Islander?
Yeah, pretty much. Yep.
So what was it like growing up in Staten Island? Was it running around?
Yeah, a lot of running around. I think kids of our era, the 60s through the 70s and the 80s, we didn't have the laptops, we didn't have any of the computer stuff, so we were out playing ball in the streets and stuff. One of my teammates, a guy named Vinny Giles, who's a great coach in Staten Island, would say, you know, we were already in shape when we got to high school and we joined these teams. And you didn't know it because, you know, you were just playing around, you know, playing in the streets, ball, bicycling, games like Ringo Livio, you know, things like that, kick the can.
That's true. Kids nowadays, with all the gadgets, they probably go into high school pretty much out of shape. Yeah. But luckily, you know, we have organizations like the Staten Island Athletic Club, New York Road Runners, offering programs. And back in those days, I remember John F. Kennedy, you know, issued the challenge to people to, you know, to stay in shape. That was your era.
The president's physical fitness challenge. It was a bunch of things, push-ups, sit-ups. Used to do those wooden sticks where you went in the hole to climb up, did the rope, and then I think it culminated with, I believe it was a 1-mile run. Yeah, you know, it was a different world, different time period.
It is. But now you said you went on to college in Staten Island. What did you study there?
History. So I graduated and I've been working for the New York City Department of Education for the past 30 years.
Oh, you were a teacher then?
Yes.
Teacher, I assume history.
Yeah, American history mostly. So yeah, at Newdorf High School.
God, I didn't realize they still teach history because I don't know if you see those TV shows where they go to the man on the street and they ask people, you know, who's the current president or who was the...
and I hear those things too, and sometimes I shake my head. So, but it is what it is, you know.
So which part of history is your favorite?
The American Civil War period is very big with me. There's a lot of sad ironies with it. People knew each other on both sides, the intimacies. That's a show in itself. And I do take my class every year to Gettysburg, Pennsylvania, the site of the Great Battle. And this upcoming week, I'm fortunate enough, I was selected by the Gilder Lamont Institute for American History to join them in a seminar, a week-long seminar in Gettysburg College, traversing over the battlefield and learning from some of the great professors of the era.
Oh, that's great that you're able to take your class to that. That's very special.
Very lucky.
After college, you're a history major. So did you go right into teaching?
Went right into teaching, yeah. And then I started teaching in '87. And then right around 1989, I looked at some of the writing going on with the track and field running world, and I said, you know, maybe I could try this, you know? And it was Fred LeBeau who gave me my first press credential. And through him, I met a fellow named Joey Goldstein and Dave Hersher. And Dave Hersher's still around. He works at the Armory, I believe. And they were very instrumental and very helpful to me in getting me press credentials. And at that time, there was a fantastic magazine that came out called American Athletics. And the cover was glossy. It had great stories in it, and the publisher editor was Larry Eder. And I contacted Larry Eder, and he opened up a lot of doors for me to get credentials after that. And I'm grateful to Larry, and I'm still with Larry to this day. Larry is everywhere. How this guy, he travels all over the world. He's at the Diamond League meets in Europe.
Oh, yeah?
Oh, yeah. And everybody I see Larry, they always say, yeah, we know Larry.
Oh, cool. And
So-
it's all for writing for this one publication?
Yeah, yeah. And the magazine is now called American Track and Field Magazine, but he also has a company, the Running Network, which is online, runningnetwork.com, and the thing I usually write for is runblogrun.com. Larry's very inclusive with a lot of his writers, and really knows, I believe, really knows how to juggle them correctly to get the right stories out at the right time.
Okay. I mentioned you've done so much writing, and that's also seems to be a lost skill and art. So what were some of the better known or your best liked stories that you could share with us?
One of the great human beings on this planet is Joe Newton. And Joe Newton is in his late 80s. He was the legendary coach of York High School in Illinois. There was a movie made about him called The Long Green Line. If I remember correctly, he coached 50 years, and in those 50 years, I think he won 27 state cross-country titles.
Illinois.
And the master of motivation. And kids went through the wall for this kid. And there's a great story tied with that. Many of our viewers have heard of Sebastian Coe, who's the former world record holder in the mile and the current president of the IAAF. In 1984, Coe was getting vilified by the British press. He was selected to be on the 84 team, even though he's the defending gold medalist from 1980. And the British press gave him a really tough time. And in his autobiography, Seb wrote, I had to get out of England. I didn't know where to go. I had to go train somewhere and be away from everybody. And Joe Newton said, why don't you come to my house in Illinois and I'll coach you. And Seb went there and took his father, Peter Coe was Seb's coach, his dad, gave Joe the workouts and pretty much incognito. And the younger generation is going to have a hard time believing that because today's world, everything's on Instagram. But Coe pretty much trained for 2 weeks prior to the LA Olympics under Joe, using the track, the golf course in the neighborhood, all this stuff. And the press didn't even smell a whiff of it. And Coe went on to defend his gold medal.
Excellent.
So,
which Olympic was that again?
84 in LA.
Oh my gosh.
And one of my great thrills, Sebastian Coe is one of my great idols in running. And one of my great thrills was interviewing him about that story. And I wrote how Seb was also the world record holder for the 800 meters, the half mile, pretty much. He ran 141.73. And when I interviewed him, the interview was 10 minutes, but I remember telling him, I said, I felt like I only did like 1 minute and 41 seconds with you. But Seb is now in a position where he's trying to run the sport on the worldwide stage. And I have to tell you, one thing that really stood out, I was blessed to be in Rio last year through the generosity
for the Olympics.
Yes, through the generosity of my great friend, another runner, Tony Galata. And Seb was unlike any other previous athletics president. Here's a guy who did not stay in the upper stands. He came down, met the people, kind of like Fred LeBeau, you know, like, hey, let's hear it for them, meeting everybody, promoting. So, you know, I think the sport is in good hands with him, and we'll just see what the future holds.
Yeah, I had a Masters runners here, Ensom LeBourne, and he did the Masters a few years ago, came in third, and there was Sebastian Coe there greeting them.
Yeah, right.
Giving them, you know, their due. And Ensom was really taken aback. He says, wow, they treated us just like everybody else. And I looked at him, you're the gods. Everybody wants to grow up to be like you guys.
Absolutely.
Oh, that's so cool.
Yeah.
Right. Well, tell us the history of the Staten Island Athletic Club. You were one of its presidents.
Sure. The Staten Athletic Club was actually founded in 1871, but it was a variety of different athletic sports. They had yachting, and it was very upper class. And somewhere in my crazy collection, I actually have a photograph of the 1912 Staten Island Athletic Club Awards Dinner, which was held at the Waldorf Astoria.
Wow.
So it wasn't just track and field and running. It was all these different sports. And Goodhue Center, a property on Staten Island, we believe was their headquarters. And around the 1920s, the club kind of disappeared. We believe it was related to the Depression.
Okay.
And nothing was really heard about the club after that. In 1967, two guys who ran, great runners from Staten Island, Joe Jones and the late Bruce Selman, in 1967, recreated the Staten Island Athletic Club as a running club. And they just celebrated their 50th year. And we were very, you know, Joe is still with us. We were honored to honor him a few months ago. And it's from Joe that the club has pretty much, Joe and Bruce, that the club has pretty much continued on his track. I actually belong to a different club, though. I belong to the Richmond Rockets.
Okay.
But the athletic club is the traditional club on Staten Island.
You could belong to more than one.
That's what I hear.
Pay the dues for
Yeah,
both.
right. Well, you know, our big living legend on Staten Island is Bill Welsh, who just celebrated his 88th birthday yesterday. And Mr. Welsh was a top-of-the-line national class runner in the 1950s, finished in the top finishes of the Boston Marathon twice. And I believe his best was 2:40. Which in that era is pretty damn good.
Yeah, yeah.
And Mr. Welsh went on to coach at Newdorp High School, where he coached Charlie Marsala, Staten Island's only sub-4-minute miler, who ran it in Indiana University, and Bill Jankunas, who upset Dwight Stones in 1976 in the Olympic trials.
In the high jump?
In the high jump. And won the trials. I believe he did 7 feet, 5 3/4 inch.
Wow.
And Mr. Welsh coached him. Mr. Welsh still runs and still competes. He'll run 2 races a weekend. He's not as fast as he used to be.
Well, he's 88.
Obviously, yep. But and he does something really great. He'll call the race director and see the race goes off at 9 a.m. He'll ask if he could start at 8 a.m. with his watch, so that the race officials and the finish line people don't have to wait too long for him.
Oh, it's very thoughtful.
Isn't it amazing? And a movie was made about him called 10 Gold Medals, which I believe won an award. It took place, I think, 3 years ago, where he trained himself with the help of some of his alums to try to win 10 gold medals at the USATF age group for his Masters
for the 85 age group?
Yes, but I don't want to reveal what happens. I want people to look at 10goldmedals.com, see the trailer, and buy the film.
All right, I got to catch that.
Right.
But, you know, we're dedicating this show to 2 of your mentors,
Yeah.
Art Hall and Tom Fleming.
Yeah.
So tell us about Art. You know, how did you meet him and
Sure.
his influence on you?
Yeah, I had mentioned my great friend Tony Galata before. I met Tony in high school prior to running. He was in a different high school. We met socially. And when I started getting into running, Art's picture was blasted all over the Staten Island Advance as the top runner. Art was a real phenomenon because he was an African-American distance runner. And next to Ted Corbett, there was really nobody in the metropolitan region who ran distances like Art, and Ted was great.
Yeah.
And Art would eventually run a 2:22 marathon in Boston and finish in the top 5 in those early New York City marathons. There's a great story with Bill Rogers with that. I think it was 74. It was hot and humid in the Central Park, the 4 loops. And Bill went out a little too hard. Bill was still in his experimental phase. He was not Bill Rogers, the world-class runner yet. He was still trying to break through. And Bill was exhausted from the heat and laid down, I believe Bill said, at the 21-mile mark along the park. And Art Hall ran by and said, "You got to get up. You got to get up." And he got him up to finish the race. And he beat Bill that day. But like I said, Bill was not Bill yet. However, though, Art told me, he said, "Jeff," he goes, "you know why I wanted him to get up?" And I thought it was sportsmanship. And he goes, "It's the northern end of Central Park. It's 1974. What do you think could happen to that guy?" You know, like, it shows how times have changed, but that was Art's major concern.
For Bill's safety.
For Bill's safety, yeah. Yeah, so what happened was I got Art Hall's phone number, and he asked me, he said, "How old are you?" And I was 16. He said, "Well, my high school captain of the club is Tony Galata." And I said, "I know Tony." And Tony lived less than a mile from my house, and I met him for a run, and he took me through the Staten Island Greenbelt, the trails of the woods, the great hidden secret of Staten Island, our great trails in the Greenbelt. And I learned all the woods from him. And what was great about Art, and similar to Tom when we get to Tom, Art always said, "I don't care if you're a good runner, I want a good person." And Art was willing to coach 8-minute milers, 9-minute milers, and the 5-minute milers. And most importantly, it wasn't that Art had a magic workout, and there is no such thing as the magic workout, contrary to some media people and, putting these things out, run this workout, But Art showed how to live the life of a runner. He gave you the lifestyle, the stretching, the nutrition, the sleep. He was very intense that way, and he lived it that way. And that really rubbed off on myself, and I think a lot of runners who were influenced by him. My developmental years, yep.
That's very critical.
Yep.
You were so lucky that he was willing to take you under his wing.
Right, and Art actually show you the quality of man he was. At the end of my junior year, I had run 1 year for the North Shore Track Club. I ran all the Central Park races, the Bagel Run,
The Bagel
the Trevera Twosome.
Oh my gosh.
The New York Road Runner Club Team Championships. We had a great runner on the club too back then, Rudy Robinson from Brooklyn, a natural, tall guy, didn't run very much. He was running 24 minutes for 5 miles. It was unbelievable.
Oh my God.
Yeah. Rudy
gosh.
Robinson. That's a name that some of our viewers, I hope, would remember. And Art sat me down in July going into my senior year and said, "Listen, if you want to really do something with your running at the high school level, you got to run for your high school coach." He was looking out for my best interests. He wasn't getting involved with these rivalries with other coaches and stuff. Yeah. And my coach, by the way, Steve Zaccarello, ran for a rival club called the Greenery Bar Racing Team, which was a really top-of-the-line club as well.
In Staten Island?
Yeah, in Staten Island. And Art Hall's North Shore Track Club on Staten Island, like the rivals. But Art was looking out for me. And that's a gift I can never repay. And like I said, I joined my Susan Wagner team with Jimmy Lynch and Vinnie Giles and Eric McCann and some of these other guys, and we won the city championships in cross country. Wow. And I was the fifth man. Just to show you the depth, I ran 16:59 for 5K at Van Cortlandt and 13:47 for 2.5, and I was the fifth man on my team. How loaded is that? I mean, we had unbelievable runners.
The New York area is blessed with great runners.
Yep.
Wow. And then Art passed away last year.
Art passed away about 5 years ago. 5 years ago. Yeah.
Okay,
time marches on.
They had the street name or something?
Last year, through the help of City Councilman Michael Cusick and City Councilwoman Debbie Rose, we were able to get the street name Art Hall Way, which is right on Myrtle Avenue, which is right off Clove Road and Forest Avenue, where he lived.
I knew something big happened last year with Art Hall.
Yep. And what was really great is that Art's mom, who was in her 90s and was in a nursing home, took a special bus to the ceremony and she passed away a few months later, so she got to see the street name for her son. A lot of people showed up. Gary Murky showed up, Hugh Sweeney, Bill Meredith. God, I'm going to forget names, but you name it.
People showed up.
Yes, and also with the support of the New York Road Runners.
Yes.
Peter Chacha, Mike Caparasso really helped us out with it, and Michael Schnall and Chris Weiler. Michael Schnall is a Staten Islander as well. Really helped us get this done, and they valued Art as well because Art was also a board member of the New York Road Runners for about 15 years.
Now, how did you intersect with Tom Fleming?
Okay, so when I ran in high school, I ran in college. I had some very good coaches, and when I got out, I heard about a guy who won the New York City Marathon twice, who only lived in Bloomfield, New Jersey, which is only like 40 minutes away. And I was actually working a meet. I had a press credential, and I met Tom there. It was the old USA TAC, which is the USA Track and Field today, National Indoors at Madison Square Garden, which they used to have every single year. And I met Tom there, and he goes, "Yeah, why don't you come out to my store one day?" Tom Fleming's running room in Bloomfield, and we just struck up a great relationship and friendship. What was really great, and I had mentioned this before in the story I wrote about Tom, for almost 5 decades, people in the New York metropolitan area, New Jersey area, even New England, would get up on a Sunday morning really early to come to Bloomfield, New Jersey at 8 a.m. to go running with Tom Fleming. And it didn't matter the ability. Sometimes there'd be 40 people there, and sometimes there'd be 150.
This is a fun run?
Yeah, and just to run with Tom on a Sunday. Now, when Tom was elite, he was running his elite pace, but you still had the opportunity to start the run with him. And Bill Rogers would sometimes come down as well. That was his great, great friend. Bill Rogers and a fellow named Joe Martino, who was a really good marathoner in the early 70s.
Wow.
And that would be the special treat. And when Tom stopped running, he'd be coaching. And people still came on that Sunday morning to Brookdale Park, which the Park Athletic Complex was just named to him very quickly. So after his passing. So it was really great. And Tom Fleming's a 2-time winner of the New York City Marathon. Nice. He won it the second year and I believe the 4th year. Right.
Gary Murky tells the story. Tom was leading the marathon the first year.
Yeah, not surprised. that was
and
Tom.
He got cramps.
Yep.
And Gary's got the win.
Yep. Tom Dadarian, who's from the Greater Boston Track Club, wrote a great book called The Boston Marathon, year by year. What he has done with that book is astounding. He has covered everybody involved with that race.
With the
Boston Marathon. But Tom Fleming gets a lot of play in there. Greg Meyer, a former Boston Marathon winner, did say when Tom passed away, he said, Tom Fleming is probably the greatest non-Boston winner in the history of the race. Tom really wanted to win the Boston Marathon very, very badly. He felt that would cement his legacy as a true world-class runner.
Wow.
And he did run 2:12, 2 hours, 12 minutes, 5 seconds. And ran 2:13 a few times, 2:14. I think he finished second twice, finished in the top 5, I believe, 6 or 7 times.
In Boston?
Boston, yep.
Wow.
But as much as he loved winning the New York ones,
he wanted to win Boston.
He wanted to win Boston, yeah. And Tom, he won over 35 marathons all around the world.
Oh, God.
And here's a trivia thing for you. In that era of amateurism, Johnny Hayes, the 1908 gold medalist, was the first athlete ever penalized for taking money after his gold medal win as a marathoner. The next runner to get in trouble was 1980, Tom Fleming. He entered the Jordache Jeans Atlantic City Marathon. First place was $50,000, and he won it.
I'll take the 50,000.
Yeah, well, runners had to do what they had to do.
Oh my gosh. The story was Tom Fleming. He was a high mileage guy, like 120, 150 miles.
He actually ran 170 miles a week. There was a few weeks he broke 200. What's interesting is Tom was not the quintessential rail thin marathon runner. He was 6'1" and weighed 155 when he was running. Now I'm 6'1", I weigh 160. I mean, I'm thin, but I'm not like rail thin like a Billy Rogers or a Frank Shorter or Andy Burfoot, And so Tom was pretty big, and considering like his dedication to it was unreal and phenomenal. And what was interesting was on a lot of his runs, he would do a 13-mile run in the morning and a 13-mile run in the evening, on the distance days, and do the same course.
Okay.
Never deviate, always be in that Bloomfield, Glenridge area, the Montclair area.
Interesting. You mentioned that he coached. He was very much loved by his youngsters. Not only his contemporaries, but the generation that didn't realize he was that good also enjoyed his training, his friendships.
Right. I remember when I started joining up with Tom was already phasing out of his competitive career. And he actually told me, he said, as good as a runner I am, I want to be just as good a coach. And he studied, he traveled around. His running room store was sponsored by Nike in the early 90s, and he had a national class team. I believe his girls won the USATF cross country championships.
Wow.
And Tom's great claim are two runners. Anne-Marie Letko, who finished, I think, top 3 New York City Marathon, sub 2:30 marathon, and finished 10th in the Olympic Games in Atlanta, was coached by Tom. And Joe LeMay, who is based in New Jersey and Connecticut now, who ran 28 minutes for 10K on the track. I believe was a 2000 Olympian, and they were coached by Tom.
Every coach wants to have one of their students be an Olympian. That's what coaches dream.
Right. And if I could add in one thing that's interesting too, when Tom started coaching Montclair Kimberly Academy, the kids who loved him, one of his kids won the state meet in the pole vault. So it shows he was able to move away from just being a distance coach to all facets of the sport, and that made Tom amazing.
Any final thoughts on Tom and Art before we go to the next step?
Their legacies is that they left a trail for others to follow. There are so many people in debt to them. That era of runners, the Shorters, the Rogers, the Flemings, Art Hall, the Corbetts, they didn't do it for the money. There was no money in the sport. They really did it for the purity of it because they wanted to do it. And what was great was that they were, Art and Tom were very similar in that they were able to open their doors to anybody. There was nothing secretive. They were always willing to share their knowledge with whoever. At the park dedication, Brookdale Park last month, somebody spoke about how he was a 9-minute miler, and Tom gave him advice, because that was Tom, but Art was the same way. If Art had an athlete who broke 40 minutes for 5 miles for the first time, he was just as thrilled for him as the guy or girl who ran elite times.
Wow.
Very inclusive people.
Very special. Do you have a physical event coming up, a race that you're looking forward to?
Our borough president is Jimmy Otto, and they do have a borough president's trail run. I believe it's the first week in August, through Clove Lakes Park, through these, we got some trails done, over the past few years, which is still a work in progress. But every year I go up to the Falmouth Road Race in Cape Cod. It's a great event. It's the birthplace of modern road racing. And I'll put in a plug here. Cameron Stracker, who is a New York City guy, wrote a great book called King of the Roads. Alberto Salazar, Frank Shorter, Bill Rogers, and the beginning of the Falmouth Road Race. And the more you read that book, you realize that's the race that got the running boom going.
Really?
And there's great stories in there, created by Tommy Leonard, the legendary bartender, Elliott Lounge. Ran it from bar to bar, 7 miles. I think it wasn't even measured correctly, 7.01. And
now that's a real bar crawl. None of this Santa stuff.
Right. But because it's Cape Cod, but people also look at the tradition and history there. And this year they're going to be celebrating the 40th, I don't want to age myself too much, but the 40th anniversary of Billy Rogers' course record, when Bill ran 32:31, and in second place was a young Alberto Salazar, 77 Falmouth.
Wow.
And that's a great race, great event. People run charities and stuff. And then, in September we have, there's pretty much a lot of racing on Staten Island almost every weekend. The Staten Athletic Club, since 1967, and prior, the old club New York Harriers from 1950. To this day, we hold a free 3-mile fun run, 9 a.m. Clove Lakes. You sign a waiver, you're in. Some people jog it, some people race it. Some Saturdays you get 10 people, some you get 100.
Wow.
The only time it's ever been canceled is if there's a road race on Staten Island that day.
Okay.
So there have been blizzards, and that race is put on. And former Staten Island Athletic Club presidents like myself, Mike Brennan, the late Vic Navarra, kept that going. Joe Jones, current president Mark Vogt, they've kept it going, and it's really our big tradition.
Staten Island Athletic Club is just tremendous.
We also have our indoor track, the Ocean Breeze Indoor Track.
Oh my gosh.
Which is state of the art.
I don't know why you guys are called the Forgotten Borough. There's so much going on.
I think they're trying to remember us now.
So professionally, you've done so many stories, interviewed so many of the greats, so many of the pioneers. Is there that one story that you're still looking for, a Pulitzer Prize winning story maybe?
I like to do the stories to inspire people. A lot of the stories I write are to like get people motivated in a lot of ways. Try to accentuate the positive. Maybe I'm a little biased, but that's me. I'm lucky, I always say, I was able to catch a lot of great runners.
On print.
On print, yeah. But I also beat him in some races recently, but time's not been a friend. And 2 years ago, when I ran the Falmouth road race, I called my dad afterwards. I said, yeah, I beat Bill Rogers, Frank Shorter, Steve Jones, all these guys. I said, yeah, but it's a different world today.
It's supposed to be a fun run. Yeah. Some are fun runs, a little more serious than others.
Right. My great interview is Rod Dixon. Rod, who has that kids marathon program where he's battling childhood obesity all over the country with his kids marathon program. And please consider looking it up online. He does God's work. What he does is absolutely amazing. The one great runner I have never met, I've been very blessed. I've met a lot of great runners, and it's always been inspiring to meet him. Never met Steve Ovett. Steve Ovett's British. When Sebastian Coe was setting his world records in the mile, the athlete taking him away from him at the same time was Steve Ovett. Between 1979 and 84, I believe they swapped the mile world records between each other 7 times, but never raced each other. Only in the Olympics in 80 and 84. And once again, I don't want to reveal much. Let people learn those stories on their own.
Great.
But there's a film being made about them where Daniel Radcliffe is playing Sebastian Coe. And I don't know what's the situation with the film at this point. It was BBC. We'll stay tuned. But I know filming had begun last summer.
Well, Daniel was so young, so this must be in his early 20s.
Yeah. But I actually talked to Daniel Radcliffe very quickly after a Broadway show one night. I said, do you run? He goes, no, but my father runs marathons. So I go, so the genetics are there. So we'll see what happens with the movie.
Well,
but
maybe he'll take up running because of the movie.
Yeah, maybe. We'll see what happens.
Well, listen, on that note, thank you so much for coming in.
My pleasure. Honored to be here, and sadly honored to be talking about our 2 old pals. 2 old pals. They missed tremendously.
I know. At least we're honoring them.
Yes, and that's what they would want. That's what they would want. And we try to take it to the standard that they set and try to continue to improve upon.
Like what Tom said, he wanted to be as good a coach as he was a runner. That's beautiful.
And if I could leave this off, Tom is also known for that one saying, somewhere in the world, someone is training when you are not. When you race him, he will win. And that's why Tom got up every morning, looked at that sign, and did what he did.